Last year, Forbes magazine published a fascinating article about the crisis in corporate leadership. Employees follow leaders trustworthy, selfless, truthful, and compassionate, while in many cases, organizations select for and reward ambition, perfectionism, and competitiveness. We're talking about leadership today. I'm Lisa Smith, and this is Focus on Business. We have Lori Berman here, Vice President of Membership and Development for the Small Business Association of Michigan. Lori, we're talking about leadership today, something that you work with thousands and thousands of owners on every day. And it's very true what they say, it's lonely at the top.
That's right, Lisa. We often hear from our business owners that they don't have someone in their business that they can rely to, and being a business owner sometimes can be a lonely place. SBAM has launched 9 regional owner-to-owner locations. This is an opportunity for members to get together with other business owners in the region. The thought is based behind a statewide leadership council that SBAM has had for 7 years. We recognize the need for business leaders to get together with each other to talk about trials, tribulations, to celebrate success, but really to share with each other as a peer. So we've launched regional meetings in Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb counties. We've also launched them in the Bay region, in Washtenaw, Kent County, and Kalamazoo. It's a chance for business owners in each of those regions to get together and share. We've also launched one in the Upper Peninsula in Marquette, and we're looking forward to having greater member participation in each of those. You've experienced that as a business leader. Tell me what it's done for you.
I have to say, being part of the Leadership Council for you folks has been affirming, validating. It's such a difficult journey to own a company, and you really think that every mistake you make is unique to you, but what you find out is other people are going through a lot of the similar kinds of struggles, and you get to hear how they're coming through it and how they deal with it. So I would encourage anyone who owns a company to get into a peer group, whether it's owner to owner or something else, because it's so beneficial.
That's great. And really is a safe place. It's a safe place for owners to get together. For more information, people can visit our website at www.sbam.org.
Today we have Bill Kimble, Alba Contreras Rodriguez, and Rob Fowler with us. We are talking about leadership, and nearly everyone has their definition of leadership. Let's start. Rob, what's your definition of leadership?
I kind of borrow one from Oswald Sanders, the great theologian, said, leadership is influence, nothing more and nothing less. And I like that. I think the ability to influence people inside your organization, outside the organization, is a pretty succinct definition of leadership from my perspective.
My definition is the ability of an individual to motivate people to achieve the goals that they have in mind.
Mine would be to take responsibility, both positive and negatively, with whatever the team produces. So you led it, so you're responsible for it.
I think if we combine all those, we have the perfect definition of leadership here. Thank you. So, Bill, you have an organization that's done really tremendously well with leadership. Can you help us understand the difference between leaders and managers?
Sure. People in our company can manage projects, which means they have to work with clients, they have to manage tasks, they have to make sure the project's delivered on time and on budget. But that's totally different than leadership. As you just heard some of the definition that we described, leadership is really about leading people, being committed to the firm, mentoring and coaching the next generation, and really having people follow you, as we talked about. So there's a big difference between those two. We see a lot of leaders come from managers, though. So they start as managers, and some can move past that point, and some cannot. So that's really the biggest difference we see.
And sometimes people need a little bit of help.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we have Alba here today. Alba, you are both an executive coach and a consultant for people who are rising through organizations and executives. What's the difference between a coach and a consultant?
A coach is a partner who works with a client in a very thought-provoking and creative process so that that client can achieve their personal and professional fullest potential. The difference with a consultant is in a consulting relationship, the person who gets hired as a consultant is pretty much hired to give the answers and the solutions versus a coach who works with the client to achieve the solutions and strategies that they together come up with.
And I would say that this is not something that we don't need in a really big way in corporate America. Forbes cited a 2-year study of 35,000 leaders. They found that 18% of managers demonstrate a high level of talent for managing others, meaning a shocking 82% aren't really that good at leading people. So there's got to be some kind of a toolbox, some kind of a checklist that leaders are possessing. Help us understand, what is that toolbox?
Well, I think it's interesting, Bill, you said that all managers are not good leaders. And I do think the first things in the toolbox of a leader is you have to be a good manager. That is, you have to have influence over people and to do that in an effective way. But I think leadership is a different set of skills. I always feel like there's 2 things you need in a toolbox as a leader. These probably not going to be on other people's lists because I think they're a little outside. I think a good apology and a good compliment. That is the ability to look someone in the eye and give them a compliment for a job well done, and to do it with anybody, anywhere who deserves it. I think there's a tendency to think if you compliment someone else, you actually lower yourself and raise them up. And I think it's just the opposite. I think you raise both. And an apology is sort of the same, that if you, as a leader, everybody messes up, and the ability to apologize for it specifically, to apologize for it sincerely, I think really gives, it raises both people up. It doesn't bring someone down. So 2 things I think you need to have in your toolbox are a good apology and a good compliment.
Some of the things that I work with clients in terms of what are some of the skills that they want to focus on. Not necessarily they come up initially in our engagement, but typically it boils down to emotional intelligence, and it's having that ability to have empathy, to have the ability to collaborate with others, and to really be very open and vulnerable to your own feelings as well as those of others. In emotional intelligence, it's one of those elements that is so necessary to be able to make people feel motivated about following you as a leader.
Our company has used an assessment tool actually called the Harrison assessment, and what it measures is the traits, the essential traits that you have to have, the preferred traits, and actually traits to avoid. And so we look at that for all of the leaders within the company. And even managers, go back to the manager's comment. We measure that for managers, and you don't want a 10 on every scale. In bluntness, for instance, you want a low score, a 1 or a 2. And so the company has done this with hundreds of thousands and millions of people over the years. The Harrison assessment's been run. And you can run a profile then against the position that you're trying to have this person fulfill. And it will give you a compatibility score. And so a couple things I would add in there, humility, obviously as a leader, and you gotta also be willing to get down in the trenches. A team enjoys working side by side with a leader. In other words, a leader isn't just giving commands. A leader is actually doing some of the work. And when you feel part of the team, then the team is more apt to follow you along the way.
So there's tools, there's soft skills, there's communication. Communication has changed for leaders over the years. The 5-minute manager was about looking somebody in the eye, touching them, giving a compliment. Today, we communicate in vastly different ways, and there are protocols and social norms with all of those platforms. How has that changed leadership, Alba?
I would say that communication is absolutely one of the main areas of opportunity for many leaders. And the fact, to your point, that there are so many different platforms which we can utilize to communicate, but we can never lose that face-to-face or more that human connection. And the fact that the reason why I emphasize communication is because at the fast pace that things are changing in our business environment, the workforce needs to feel that they can listen to what's going on. They want that transparency, and they want the ability to determine how and what they need to do to support the vision of that leader.
I've heard it said that good followers can become good leaders, and good leaders are good followers. Part of that is about supporting the vision of whoever it is that's in charge today and understanding that. I think that that's a skill that you have to learn as an employee. So what are the areas we're working on to bring up those folks who have leadership potential? How do you bring people up in your organization?
One of the things that companies do to support their high potential employees and in general, it's leadership development. One of the things that I like to emphasize though is that leadership development is important, but also having a coaching component to that leadership development is very important because each individual has its own uniqueness. And therefore, when you go through a training program, you have a group of folks that go through it, but then working with each individual and leveraging on their strengths is the ability of how we can identify how can we really fully utilize all the resources that we have in an organization is by taking that uniqueness of each individual to be able to deliver the goals of the organization.
Yeah, I think what many people learn by having opportunity to lead. So I do think giving people an opportunity to lead something, both inside and outside of the organization, I think are great opportunities. I would say for smaller organizations, for many of our member small businesses, there's not opportunity inside the organization, a clear path to go from one position to another position. And that makes it a little more challenging for a smaller organization. So I think you have to look for those opportunities outside sometimes to give somebody an opportunity to lead a project, to lead an event. And I think so many of us learn by mistakes and learn by watching others and thinking, I don't think I want to do it that way. So I just think having those kind of opportunities to lead is a good leadership tool.
Yeah, I would add to that to say you could also, in a larger organization, look for some type of ownership. What we try to do early on with folks that we believe are going to be future leaders is tell them where they're going to be someday. In other words, not just offer them a small amount of shares. Say that we see you as a 3% owner. They may not be able to get there in a year or two, maybe take them 10. But yet, not only are they being offered some ownership in the company, but also they kind of know where their stopping point is or where their, what their potential is within the company. Totally agree with Rob. You've got to really lead by example. Have them lead different things in the organization. Delegation of a leader is what creates another leader, right? And eventually, as you pass things along and you grow confidence in that individual, then you pass more things along. And before you know it, that person that you're passing them along to can do almost what you can do, which is a really great leader. The leader that started it by passing it down and delegating it really helped create and mentor and coach that next generation. So that's what it's really all about, transferring knowledge from one to another. You didn't get there without help either, right? That's the other thing leaders have to recognize. We had somebody helping us along the way. So make sure you do the same.
So what kinds of help have you seeked out in order to help? What do leaders seek out when they're looking for support?
Typically, they do have what I would call your own board of directors, and that means by having different roles that sit in that board, your personal board of directors, and that can be mentors, it could be advisors, it can be consultants, it can be confidants, it can be coaches, but it's surrounding yourself with the people who you can trust, because as the higher you go up into an organization, the lonelier that you can feel. And having that ability to have that support system that you can rely on depending on the situation or issue that you want to address it is important to always have that.
So what if you don't have that? What kinds of, where can you go for that kind of support? Where do you start?
Well, I think one of the most important traits of a leader is that they, what's the old saying, know thyself, that they know what they're good at and they know what they're not so good at. They understand their space and they surround themselves with people who are good at things they are not. And so sometimes that's a management team, sometimes that's outside resources. I think understanding what your strengths are and with clarity what your weaknesses are really helps a leader sort of lead effectively by really understanding their own blind spots and working hard to fill those blind spots with either people on their team or outside resources.
There's a vulnerability to leading.
Yeah.
It's challenging yourself and being self-aware.
Right. But when you're young, you really have to be able to and willing to take chances. You know, I mean, I look in the early part of my career, probably 6 or 7 years into my career, we had an office in Grand Rapids and it needed a new leader. And so I was pretty young at the time, but they were looking within the firm to have that next leader be in Grand Rapids, and I stepped up and took the position. Moved my family over to Grand Rapids area, and loved the area, by the way, and led that. I knew that by leading that office, it would put me in meetings, it would put me in positions that I would learn information that I couldn't get any other way. And so a leader, as you grow in a company, you have to show initiative. By showing initiative, most times, most companies will embrace that, right? Because there are a lot of others that are afraid to show initiative. And if you do that, you don't have to be arrogant about it. There's a big difference, right? You don't have to walk around and say, I'm the leader of the Grand Rapids office. But you really just do your job, and leadership, comes with that. But anyhow, so I think I would say to any young person or person early in their career, don't be afraid to take some chances. You know, they will pay off.
There are probably a lot of people watching out there that are being led today by people who may or may not understand how to develop a good leader. I remember very early in my career, I had a manager who had his own style, and his expectation was that my style was going to be his style. And it was, I could not understand why I felt so uncomfortable with it. It never felt right. I felt like I was out of place, not succeeding, because his idea was that you manage like this, you have conversations like this. And what I continue to read about as it relates to leadership is finding your authentic self. And then placing yourself in a company with the values that can really foster who that authentic self is as a leader.
I think it's important actually to be kind of a student of leadership if you aspire to it, and that is to just really observe what effective leaders do and what ineffective leaders do, and make it your own. I think literally much of what I learned about leadership was working for someone who I think in hindsight wasn't that good at it. But I think you can learn an awful lot from someone just making those decisions. I will not lead that way if I'm ever handed the mantle of leadership, or I will. I really admire this style of leadership and it fits me. I think study it, observe it, and understand what's effective, what's not, and what's in your wheelhouse.
One of the things that I would add to that is that in terms of learning from others, is that now more than ever, leaders need to be willing to become lifelong learners, because everything is changing so rapidly. The famous term of VUCA, everything is very volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And in that environment that we're living in, we're trying to grow our own businesses and making sure that we can be that leader for others. Being a lifelong learner, it's absolutely a must. And there are so many things that need to be learned still, and people need to be willing and appreciate it and actually have fun with it.
Yeah, the other thing I've learned recently, even in the last 5 years, is there's different styles of leadership. I think there's 6. I mean, don't quote me on that, but
there's a number.
I was reading through them,
know.
and actually, you want to be good at 3 or 4 of them, and you want to, not change, not act, but yet you want to be able to ebb and flow between different leadership styles. One leadership style that I can tell you is follow me. In other words, I'll work hard, you work hard with me. That's one. That doesn't always work though. In other words, that doesn't resonate with every employee that you're working with. But there are other styles. It was a Harvard white paper, I think, is where I read this, about the different leadership styles. And really the best leaders are good at 4 or 5 of those leadership styles. And so that's what the article was all about.
And where was this?
It was just on different leadership styles. It was a Harvard,
Harvard, okay, all right. Well, I want to look that up.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. Any last thoughts from someone we missed?
I think if you aspire to leadership, observe leaders, be a little bit of a student, be a lifelong learner, learn from bad managers if that's the case, but I think just pay attention to what's going on around you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Technology is such a big part of success in business.
Yes, it is.
How should leaders be thinking about technology?
Well, leaders, you've heard the term leaders must lead, right? So this is an area where they must lead, and you can't delegate some of this stuff. You don't have to understand the actual details of the technology, but from a strategic perspective, leaders have to understand where the world's going, where the big companies are taking us, which is cloud. All the big companies want everything, all the time in the cloud, and it will happen. So leaders need to embrace that. They need to understand that's where the world is going, and they need to orient their company so that they can get there. And that means understanding, reading, learning, talking to consultants, figuring out where they need to align themselves so that they can embrace those future technologies.
So is it leading also in terms of budgeting, planning, strategizing? And I think budgeting was really the big question there.
Right, so there's the vision piece, which I just talked about, and then how do you take that? So that would be with the leader saying, we need the budget, of course, we need the plan. They don't necessarily need to do it. They can go delegate that, get some smart technology people around them that can help figure out the right products or the right licenses and make that work.
So do you put a plan in place and say, technology, if we're going to lead, is going to go here, we need to be there before everyone else?
That's correct. So thinking about how to use that technology to empower the organization to get where it needs to go, to get the objectives that it needs to accomplish, and then put the plan in place.
Very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Focus on Tech, brought to you by Providence, making technology easier.
Leah, you are on the Emerging Leaders Committee for the Michigan Bankers Association. What advice would you give to young professionals in order to help them demonstrate leadership at work?
With the Emerging Leader Committee, we're really taking that mid-level group of people within organizations that have really mastered the technical skills to do their job, but we're helping them master those soft skills. So teaching them the leadership ability, teaching them how to get buy-in from everybody in their organization, teaching them how to influence, and really that peer leadership at this stage is so important. Teaching them that it's okay to fail, that every leader fails, but teaching them to do it with that calculated risk.
How does the bankers community help small business owners with leadership?
Absolutely. So a big part of leadership is time to invest in your people and within your organization. So banks really try to help with that time management through things like merchant services and online banking, giving them the tools and the resources to run their business with ease so they're not spending so much time doing the administrative work.
And I would imagine that leadership in the community is important as well.
Absolutely. At Dart Bank, we love to give back to our community. That's one of our main goals, is to serve our community in financial and non-financial ways. And one of the greatest ways that we can do that is by serving our local communities.
It's a beautiful way to lead, for sure. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Focus on Banking, brought to you by Michigan Bankers Association.
Denise, we know leadership is important. Why is it also a legal issue?
Right, so I mean, leadership is such a huge word and it's such a huge sort of topic, but it is a legal issue. When you think about it, the culture that you are creating in your business stems from your leadership. It stems from the top, the directors, the CEO, whoever's at the top of your organization, the owners, and especially the people that are there day to day. So they're going to set that culture. So for example, if you're in a regulated industry, self-reporting is incredibly important, right? And you need to make sure that everybody in the organization knows that their ability to be responsible in business and having them feel like they're a part of your culture of sort of proactiveness, especially in a regulated business, is going to be rewarded and is not going to be looked down on. They're not, snitching. They're helping to move the business forward. I think it's incredibly important to realize that what you do every day, your example, just like it's having, children, right? They're watching what you do every day and how you set that example of being an honest business, a responsible business. And there could be liability if you don't. I mean, if you don't set a positive culture, if you don't start that from day one with them, showing your employees how you treat customers, and even down to their responsibilities as employees as far as your contracts are concerned, you could get into some liability issues depending on, especially if you have a retail business or they're interacting with the public. So once you get that buy-in and once you start infusing that culture of responsibility throughout your business, you'll know that you'll be able to sleep easier at night knowing that they have the same buy-in that you do. And that, that's going to be part of your vital risk management strategy for your business, to know that you're not, potentially having liability out there.
Wise words. Thank you.
Focus on Law, brought to you by Policella and Associates, PLLC.
I'll close with a quote from Peter Drucker. Management is doing things right. Leadership is doing the right things. We'll see you next week.